Hi, listeners. I'm Colleen Dieter, landscape consultant and certified arborist at ATXGardens.com. Welcome to the ATX Gardens Podcast, where every other week I share simple, timely tips for what to do in your Central Texas garden right now. If you're watching on YouTube, tap like and subscribe for more gardening help. Hey there, gardening friends. Today we're talking about what to do in the second half of March, which is a very busy time for gardeners. This episode is sponsored by my landscape consulting website, ATXGardens.com. Let's get to it. So in general, in Austin, we got some beautiful rain recently. Everything is going to be popping up, growing fast now that it's spring and we got the rain. You'll start seeing everything growing really fast now. And so start keeping tabs on your weeds, sticky weed, hedge parsley, rescue grass, clover burrs. I've been seeing a lot of clover burrs lately. Grass burrs and fall dandelions, your Bermuda grass, Johnson grass, everything will be growing at this time of year. It's a very weedy time. So make sure you've got your weeding tools handy, hose, digging forks, your Fiskars uproot weeder, your Japanese handy weeders, your hori knives, everything like that. See show notes for weeding tools. Keep in mind, anytime you're struggling to remove weeds, there's probably a tool for that. So check out the links in the show notes and get to know some of the weeding tools that can save you a lot of time and anguish. If you had plants indoors or in a greenhouse to protect them from cold weather, now it's totally fine to bring them outside. There's no freezes in the long range forecast, so it should be completely safe to bring them out. Now, speaking of, it's time for pruning and feeding of your citrus trees. So if you've got lemons, oranges, limes, tangerines, satsumas, kumquats, all those kinds of things, get them into their permanent spots for the warm weather. If you have them in pots, you can figure out where you want to put that pot until next fall. The citrus in the pots, I like to remove all of the branches that are growing back into the middle of the plant like this, that are crossing. So at the end of the pruning session, your whole plant is sort of shaped like a vase or a martini glass, where the interior is more open, because that allows more air penetration and light into the middle of the plant and helps prevent infestations of small sucking insects like whiteflies, aphids, and scales and mites, because citrus tend to be really prone to those types of insects. And I found that a little bit of pruning at this time of year can help prevent those infestations. Or if you have branches where the leaves are kind of touching each other, a lot of overlapping leaves, it's a good idea to remove some of those, again, because the insects really like to get into those spaces where the leaves are real close together. You can use hand pruners and loppers with a short handle. I really like these Corona loppers that have the short handles, and I'll put a link to those in the show notes. I do like to clean the hand pruners and the loppers with rubbing alcohol or Lysol um, between the plants because fruit trees, including citrus, are prone to certain diseases more than other plants. And so I like to make sure I'm cleaning my tools between plants so that I'm not spreading diseases around. If you have citrus trees planted in the ground and they have cold damage from the winter, just remove any dead branches. You'll be able to tell that they're dead because usually citrus branches are green if they're alive, and if they're dead, they turn brown. So cut off any dead branches. The dead leaves will fall off on their own, but you can pull them off if you want to. And that's all the trimming you need to do on the citrus that are planted in the ground. Your citrus might be grafted. Some types of citrus trees are grafted onto rootstock, and the rootstock is usually trifoliate orange. But some citrus is not. Sometimes citrus trees are on their own roots, which is an advantage because if the top of the tree dies in the cold, the um, citrus trees that are on growing on their own roots can grow back from the ground. If they're grafted to trifoliate orange and the whole top of the tree dies, then the trifoliate orange will start growing up from the ground, and that's not going to make delicious fruit. And it's not the kind of tree that you intended when you bought it. It's hard to tell sometimes. I'll post a picture of trifoliate orange so that you'll know what to look for because it looks different in the leaves from other types of citrus. In future episodes, I'll talk about what to do if you have trifoliate orange rootstock growing up where you had your old citrus tree where the top died. After you trim your citrus trees, I recommend using a soil drench with liquid humate, top dressing around the root zone of the tree with Espoma citrus tone fertilizer and a little bit of compost. Add a nice layer of mulch on top too, just about an inch of compost and less than an inch of mulch. And then later, when you water the trees, use Medina Has to Grow liquid fertilizer. That's my recipe for success for getting a lot of fruit from your citrus trees. They like to be fed a lot, especially if they're in pots. They depend on you for all of their food and water if they're in pots. So make sure you give them a lot of it because the citrus will really respond well and produce a lot of fruit that way. It's also a good time to repot citrus if you need to. After about 2 years of citrus trees in pots, you'll notice that the tree may start to sink in the pot. The potting soil degrades over time and starts to shrink. And that can cause a situation where the soil shrinks away from the sides of the pots. And then when you water, the water just rolls off the top and around the side of the pot and doesn't actually sink in to feed the roots. Sometimes the potting soil degrades in such a way that it stops draining properly. It kind of does the opposite thing where the water stops flowing through the root ball and gets stuck. And it's really easy for citrus to get overwatered in that situation. So it's important to once every 2 years or so to pull the citrus tree out of the pot, refresh that potting soil, You have to use potting soil. It's really important to use potting soil only. Don't use topsoil or soil from the ground. When you pull the trees out of the pot, then you can either get a bigger pot and replant your little tree into the bigger pot to give it more room to grow bigger. If you don't want it to get bigger, which sometimes we don't want them to get bigger because we need to be able to move them in and out, right? So in the wintertime, we need to bring them inside. And if they get too big, sometimes you can't fit them through the door, you can't lift the pots, or they won't fit in the space that you have for them in the wintertime. So you can, in that case, do some root pruning where you remove the bottom quarter of the root ball. So cut off the bottom 25% of the root ball. You can use an old pruning saw or a bread knife or a hoary knife and just saw through the root ball, remove that bottom 1/4, and then put fresh potting soil back in your pot and put the tree back in there, and it will grow back in and fill up that space in the pot over the next 2 years. It sounds harsh, but it works. In more fruit tree news, March is time for grafting, especially late March. I think I mentioned in the last episode, it's around the time when the Texas mountain laurels finish blooming, and that's about now. I'm planning to graft some grapes and nectarines that I got at the Scion swap last month. I've got them stored in my fridge. In the next couple weeks, I'll venture out into the yard and see if I can start grafting the new grape variety that I got onto my old Mustang grape that's growing on my back fence. And I have some nectarine scions that I'm going to try grafting onto a little feral peach tree that I have growing in my yard too. So if you're wondering about grafting, I really recommend this book. It's called Fruit Tree Grafting for Everyone by my friend Susan Poisner and Steph Muma. And I'll have links to this book in the show notes. I also encourage you listeners to sign up for the Central Texas Seed Savers newsletter to find out about grafting fruit tree workshops that we'll have coming up this spring. I don't have all of the details yet, but we'll have more fruit tree workshops throughout the year. Now is a really good time to plant Mediterranean trees like figs, pomegranates, and bay laurels, or tropical trees, things like loquats and anakawas, South Texas native trees. But it's too late now to plant other woody trees like oaks, pecans. It's too late for rose planting. If you don't already have them in hand, don't buy any more trees or shrubs or woody vines like cross vines and Carolina jessamine. They all definitely need to be planted by April 1st. If you already have them on hand and they're waiting to be planted, get them in the ground ASAP. But don't acquire any more woody plants. It's so hard to plant them when they're actively growing and they have their soft new growth. And then it's getting hot outside at the same time. It's really hard on them and it makes it really hard for them to survive the summer. So it's wise to wait until fall to plant those woody plants. Do not do any tree pruning right now or shrub pruning. If you can avoid it, it's not a good time. It's really hard on them in spring when they have all their new leaves coming out. They need to be left alone. It's also oak wilt season, and if you trim your oak trees now, you can spread oak wilt, so avoid any kind of trimming on woody plants right now. For your other fruit trees, like peaches, plums, nectarines, apples, and pears, in the last episode, I talked about spraying for plum curculio, worms and maggots, all those little worms that can get into your fruit. I talked about spraying after the tree has lost about 85% of its blossoms, and either spraying with takedown garden spray or using micro mesh or orchard socks. And so it's still, some of the fruit trees are going to bloom a little later than others. So it may still be time for your particular fruit trees. If they're just starting to set fruit, go out there and look for the teeny tiny fruits and see if you can see them, and cover them with orchard socks or micro mesh, or spray with the takedown garden spray to prevent worms from infesting your fruit. And you'll need to spray them again if you decide to spray instead of using the micro mesh or orchard socks. You'll need to spray them again. And that's when the fruit has just barely formed and has expanded through its papery covering, which is known as shuck split. So that little papery covering is called the shuck. And when the shuck splits, that's when you need to spray again to prevent the caterpillars. And then you'll need to spray them again about 10 to 14 days after that. So you're going to spray 3 times at when the blooms start dropping off the tree and they've lost about 85% of their flowers. And then you spray again at shuck split, which is about 14 days after they bloom. And then another 10 to 14 days after shuck split, you'll spray again. That's another reason why I prefer to use the orchard socks, because you just put the orchard socks on once and then the fruit forms inside the orchard sock and you don't have to do it over and over again. It just depends kind of on how much fruit you want to get too, because if you want hundreds and hundreds of fruits, putting orchard socks on each one is really time consuming and spraying might be easier. But if you're like me and you're just hoping to get a bowl full of plums once a year, then you can put the orchard socks on each fruit. So you get to decide which way to go. Or you might not care about worms in your fruit too, but sometimes the infestations can get pretty bad. Okay, and now we're going to have our mid-episode sponsor break. Hey y'all, this is Colleen Dieter from ATXGardens.com. If you want personalized help with your landscape, book a consultation and we'll walk your yard together. I'll answer all your questions and we'll create a plan together that feels doable for you. This week, I met with Kyle in Northeast Austin, and he had a sloped yard, and he hired some landscapers to build some retaining walls for him, and they filled the retaining walls with topsoil. And Kyle wanted to know what he could plant in those new spaces, and I let him know that he needed to prepare the topsoil with a little bit more compost just to add a little more nutrition to the soil before he plants. And we made a plan together. He was interested in pink. He really loves the color pink and pink flowers. And we talked about some of my favorite types of roses that are very low care roses that he could plant, and some other plants that he had researched, but he wanted some reassurance that they were the right choices for his space. And some of them were, and some of them weren't. So I helped him figure out how many plants he could fit in those areas, and he took his notes, and now he's ready to get planting this spring. So check out ATXGardens.com, and let's get back to the episode. Now is a good time for perennial gardening and all of your bulbs and ornamental grasses. There's a lot going on because they're all actively growing right now. So if you still have trimming to do from the winter damage, try to get to it right away. It's going to get harder and harder to remove dead stems now that all of them are actively growing. It's important to avoid cutting as much of the new growth as possible. Now is a really good time for planting, transplanting, and dividing all of your perennials, grasses, bulbs, cacti, succulents, and ground covers. If they're, growing back and you start to notice that there's some, uh, they've been spreading and there's new plants coming up in places where you don't want them, like maybe they're getting jammed up next to a walkway. Now is a really good time to get in and dig up those extra plants and transplant them to new locations or pass them along to friends. It's very tempting to buy new plants right now, and it's certainly okay to do so. It's the best time of year for perennial planting. But just try to remember if you planted bulbs or perennials in the fall or any time in the past that maybe aren't popping up quite yet, that are maybe later to the game. So some of the tropical perennials like Pride of Barbados, for example, sometimes they don't start to grow until it gets really, really hot in May. And you may not see them coming up yet. And you have to remember that they're there so that you don't plant other plants on top of them. And then later it becomes a big tangle with lots of different plants growing all over each other. That's a really common mistake, especially with bulbs. If you planted bulbs in the fall or winter, you might forget that they're there. Sometimes the bulbs take an entire year to start growing. You may not see them at all this year. And then after one whole year of being in the ground, then they start growing. So it's really important for you to get some labels, some markers of some sort, or draw a design for yourself, a map, so that you can remember where your plants are so you don't plant too many things. Now, moving on to the vegetable and herb garden. This is a busy time for the vegetable and herb garden. You can still plant strawberries and Swiss chard. Those are kind of the last of the cool season veggies that you could plant at this time of year. You have to plant them from transplants as little plants right now. In addition, you could start planting all the warm season vegetables from transplants like tomatoes, eggplants, and peppers. And then there's a bunch of warm season vegetables that you can plant from seed at this time of year. That includes beans, all types of beans, corn, cucumbers, summer squash, any kind of warm season green. So that includes like New Zealand spinach, Malabar spinach, stuff like that. There's one called Molokia that's pretty popular, becoming real popular. All of those can be planted directly into the ground from seed at this time of year. And now is a really good time for planting all kinds of warm season herbs from transplants. So those are the little plants that you get from the nursery or from friends. Rosemary, oregano, thyme, lavender, lemon balm, catnip. Those are all good choices. Basil can be planted now from either plants or seed directly planted into the ground. I also really recommend trying some warm season flowers in your garden too. You can plant sunflowers, zinnias, and cosmos directly from seed at this time of year too, and those will help attract beneficial insects to your garden in addition to being beautiful, and you can use them as cut flowers and bring them indoors to enjoy them. Now, finally, we're going to talk a little bit about grass. The last 2 weeks of March are a really important time for lawn care in Central Texas. So if you still have turf grass and you still care about your turf grass, which you don't have to, by the way, but if you still are caring for a little lawn, a patch of lawn, now is the time to mow it. And it's the first mowing of the season when it starts actively growing. I recommend just this one time in the spring, mowing the grass low with the mower set down on the lowest setting. And this is also the only time I recommend bagging the clippings from it. That's just to remove some of the thatch, some of the dead grass from the winter, and to give it a fresh start for the spring. And this is the only time I recommend that. So you just mow it low one time with the bag on the mower just once. And then later in the season, when you get into the habit of mowing, once every 2 weeks or so, then after that, set the mower on the highest setting and take the bag off and leave the clippings on the grass. It's really, really important to mow as high as possible for the rest of the season through the whole summer and leave the clippings on the grass so that they can decompose and feed the grass. Now, after your first mowing, it's a really good time to fertilize the lawn with an organic, granular, dry fertilizer like Sustain 824 or Microlife 624. Follow the directions on the bag very carefully. Sprinkle that over the grass, and then I recommend watering it in with Medina Plus soil activator or some homemade compost tea. And you can water that in either using a watering can. What you're trying to do is you're just trying to get the fertilizer down onto the ground and rinse it off of the leaves of the grass so that it comes into contact with the soil. So you're trying to get the fertilizer in contact with the soil, and you use water to do that, to kind of rinse it down, and the water also activates the fertilizer. But if you're going to water in the fertilizer, you might as well add some other goodies to it, like the Medina Plus soil activator or homemade compost tea. And both of those products will help nurture the microorganisms that live in the soil and colonize the roots of the grass to help feed the grass and make the grass healthier over time. So you can do that watering in with the Medina Plus or the homemade compost tea. You can either do that just with a watering can, or you can use a hose end sprayer. Okay, so that wraps up today's episode. Please check out the show notes for links to all of the tools that I mentioned. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a fellow Central Texas gardener because it really helps me to grow my show. I'm Colleen with ATXGardens.com, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the ATX Gardens Podcast. For show notes, tools, and to book a consultation with me, visit ATXGardens.com. Happy gardening! See you next time.